65, wanted custody, being Marco Stevenson.
Make sure you bring that BB gun.
Station 30, go and confirm the warrants out of us.
Oh, I got a BB gun. I'm C. Ward. It's a BB gun. And now go them kids, they witnesses it's a BB gun.
Yeah,
it's a BB gun.
On you.
I didn't do nothing. It's a BB gun. They right there, they my witness. I was talking to them, joking with them about a movie, Boys in the Hood. I can't help what somebody else's perception is.
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
It's
their perception that counts. They perceived it as a threat, so you are under arrest.
How was it a threat? I was with some kids.
They perceived it as a threat.
Oh my God, now you can't have a BB gun. I'm over 18, so I can have a BB gun.
Well, you're also acting up, too. We've had to deal with you just about every day for... You got a knife? Just got it off of it.
No, you can just pull down the string.
No.
You can wait till I get to jail and take it out.
Better watch it, Marco.
I spit a toothpick in the grass.
Yeah, and the next time you'll eat grass.
You might get that for me. Oh!
Don't pull away.
You understand?
You understand?
All right,
Don't pull away. You understand?
Don't pull away.
Don't pull away. You get it? Do you get it?
Yes, sir.
Are you going to straighten up?
Yes, sir.
Because I ain't playing with you today. Do you understand? Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
Now, we're going to get up, and you're not going to do anything stupid again. You understand?
Yes, sir.
Umbrella. She's up, she's up. Whole nother level of shit you can't even understand.
What is good, my people? We are live, back again with another episode of The Forecast. So, out in Texas, a young brother by the name of Jordan Edwards, who was just 15 years old, was shot in the head and killed by the police. He was shot by Officer Roy Oliver. Now, of course, this officer is going with the "I fear for my life" story. But let's go back and find out what happened to the brother Jordan Edwards.
67 hours after a teenager was shot and killed by Balch Springs police, an officer has been fired. His actions tonight under investigation. And Jordan Edwards' story has exploded into the national conversation on race and our police. Good evening. I'm John McKay.
And I'm Cynthia Sayre. A lot of big developments in this case tonight. This is now former Balch Springs police officer Roy Oliver. He's seen here on the department's Facebook page, a department he served for the last 6 years. News 8's Marie Saavedra joins us live now. Marie, the Edwards family is praising the decision to fire this officer.
They are, Cynthia. They said tonight that they're calling this move commendable strides toward justice in the last 24 hours. But this is really just one item on a very long list of things that the Edwards family says they need to have to bring justice to this boy lost at just 15 years old. Saturday night on Barron Drive in Balch Springs, a group of teens had a party. It would be the block where a police officer's decision would cost him his job and the life of 15-year-old Jordan Edwards.
On May 2nd, 2017, Chief Haber terminated Roy Oliver from the Balch Springs Police Department.
The 3-day journey from the teen's death to the firing of Officer Roy Oliver was one of confusion and tension. Initially, Chief Jonathan Haber said the car Edwards was in threatened officers. Monday, he took that back.
The information that I got, the information that I saw led to that mistake. Again, that's solely on me, and we're going to move beyond that because I've already talked about it.
Tuesday, he said Officer Oliver, who served Balch Springs for 6 years, was terminated for violating policy, though he wouldn't say which ones.
We support the Balch Springs Police Department, but we do not support this officer.
Neighbors applauded the move and the chief's candor.
He owned it. That's what I'm telling you. He owned the situation, and I think that's going to take a lot of tension off of the whole community.
Edwards' family agrees, though a family member told a Dallas crowd at a meeting Tuesday this is only the beginning.
They're moving in the right direction. However, it's not nearly enough. It's not nearly enough.
She says for his sake, they won't stop until there's an arrest and a conviction for that decision made back on Barron Drive. There is one other thing that the family says it wants. It feels that Jordan Edwards and his brothers who were there with him that night of his death had their names painted in a very bad light when that initial incorrect information about what happened came out. So they want a public apology to them from Balch Springs Police.
So Officer Roy Oliver, who was called to a teenage house party, decided to shoot inside of a moving vehicle full of teenagers against protocol. And one of the bullets hit Jordan Edwards in the head, killing him instantly. Now, even though initially the police chief was preparing his Back the Blue speech, when he actually decided to do some investigation on the police officers, he found out the officer, Roy Oliver, said that the car was coming towards him when the video clearly shows that the car was moving away from him, according to the police chief. And in this case, they decide to go ahead and press charges on this particular officer.
New details about what happened seconds before a Balch Springs police officer opened fire on a car, killing a 15-year-old. I'm Steve Eager.
And I'm Heather Hayes. Those details are in the arrest warrant that was issued for fired Officer Roy Oliver. Plus, we're hearing from two teenagers who were sitting behind Jordan Edwards in the back seat of the car when Oliver opened fire with a police rifle.
Oliver turned himself in Friday on a murder charge, and he's now out on bond. Sean Rabb, first on Fox 4 with his new information and the interview with Maximus and Maxwell Everett. Sean.
Yeah, Steve, two teens who still don't understand why things went so wrong so fast 9 days ago, losing one of their closest friends at their first Saturday night house party. Maximus and Maxwell Everett, twins with a story to tell.
We were just 5 innocent teenagers who just was having a good time that night. Cops got called, and everything else that happened is just tragic.
In the backseat of a car with Jordan Edwards and his two brothers, Edwards shot in the head and killed by then Balch Springs police officer Roy Oliver.
No one did nothing wrong in the car, no one.
Two Balch Springs officers arrived at the house party and were inside when what sounded like gunshots rang outside. The officers went looking for the gunfire, the boys leaving the party, driving in reverse away from officers. The arrest warrant says Officer T. Gross gave verbal commands to the driver to stop, exhibited a firearm, and continued ordering the vehicle to stop. The warrant continues, the vehicle continued and stopped shortly, then proceeded to move forward in motion. As the car passed Officer Gross, he punched the rear window with his duty weapon, causing it to break.
I'm not sure. I ducked, so I don't know what he did.
The arrest warrant goes on. Officer Oliver positioned himself behind and to the right of Officer Gross, discharged multiple rounds from his patrol rifle as the vehicle drove past him. 15-year-old Jordan Edwards, mortally wounded, a rifle shot to the right side of his head.
What were you thinking, guys?
I was hoping that I was trying to think about if Jordan was still alive and that this night went crazy too fast.
The boys, glad the investigation quickly led to the arrest of Oliver on the charge of murder.
That's good that happened, because normally it doesn't happen. The same thing. Glad it happened fast enough, because most cases don't ever get charged, and what he did was wrong.
The boys say everyone in the car was separated and that no one told them what was happening for hours. Balch Springs police reviewing actions of all officers that night, including the other officer at the shooting scene, Steve, and the officers who handled the 4 of the people in that Chevrolet Impala.
Right, and Sean, now we know that the second officer did have a gun out, had his weapon out, close enough to bash out the window, so he was close enough to see inside the car. And I don't know of any reports that he ever even thought about shooting. What do we know about? He didn't shoot. We know that, right?
He did not shoot. He was close enough to the car that he could take his duty weapon and punch the window and break the rear window out as the car drove past him. And then the second officer behind and to the right of him opened fire with the rifle. But there's no indication that he thought about shooting his weapon. The law gives police officers the right to pull their weapon and to use it to force you to obey their commands.
Do we know any of those young men able to talk about conversation in the car? You know, the driver, we've heard things, maybe couldn't get it in the park or drive or whatever like that from one of the attorneys.
No, what I got from them today is that it was chaos when they heard the gunfire.
Yeah.
Now, before we go celebrating that this cop is charged with murder, first we gotta wait to see what happens. Because we have seen other officers who were charged with murder, And people say that the murder was wrong and they still walk away scot-free, not like nothing ever happened. Now, Officer Roy Oliver is facing up to life in prison for 7 felony charges against him. But the thing is, the last I checked, they still haven't set a date for his trial, even though they say the murder charges is going to be the first thing they pursue against him. But even the Dallas County DA, Faith Johnson, had to say that prosecuting Roy Oliver is not a political statement, but the right thing to do. As if charging a cop with murdering a 15-year-old kid, shooting into a car full of teenagers, violating all kind of rules and regulations. But that's something that you would still have to say is not political, as if this kid's death has anything to do with politics.
It's important to let our community know that justice is proceeding effectively and thoroughly at the Dallas County District Attorney's Office. This is the very first time we have issued an arrest warrant for a police officer before the case was presented to the grand jury. As we move forward, my office continues to be committed to seeking justice for Jordan and his family.
What we see now is an aggressive prosecution. He is in a very compromising situation when it comes to what am I going to do. When you talk about a deal being made, if I was the defense attorney, I would be trying to make a deal, because otherwise he's going to prison. Like there's no question now in my mind whether or not he's going to get locked up. I can't tell you what he's going to get locked up on, and I can't tell you how much time he's going to be locked up for, but it's too much to overcome. So at this point in time, I do feel a lot more confident about the state's ability to secure some sort of a conviction.
We believe that we have a very strong case. We're going to be vigorous in our prosecution, and we're going to be very aggressive. So we're planning to win this case.
Even though this is the same cop who was indicted a month before on 2 aggravated assault charges following accusations he pulled the gun on 2 people. And that was an unrelated road rage incident weeks before he shot Jordan Edwards. However, they didn't investigate that case more thoroughly until after he shot this kid, because originally that same police said that no crime occurred. Now, while some people will say this is a moral victory, right now Roy Oliver is free on $700,000 bond related to the murder charge and the aggravated assault charges put together. And the judge decided not to increase that bond for the 4 new aggravated assault charges. And this is the legal system that we're hoping and praying and wishing that we could have faith in, and someday magically everything will just work out. Now, this cop who was already indicted, who somehow was still out on the streets patrolling and caught up in his own lies, can still use the defense of, I feared for my safety, I feared for my life, and we'll see how that plays out for him. Now, what happened to Jordan Edwards was very similar to what happened to the young brother Corin Thomas down in North Carolina, where he was minding his own business, leaving from a party, and he was shot by this dude named Chad Copley. Now, this man was just walking down the street minding his own business, and this guy, Chad Copley, shoots from his garage and hits and kills this young brother. Now, even though Chad Copley isn't a cop, guess what? He still can use the defense, I feared for my life, I feared for my safety, I feared for the safety of my property. Now, even though this regular average citizen, not even a cop, now, even though they do decide to charge Chad Copley with the murder of this young brother, and even though he could be facing the death penalty, which, let's be real, he most likely won't get, even if he does get convicted. Now, even though they did charge this man, and he could be facing the death penalty, the judge still says, well, we'll give you a bond. It's $1 million bond, but they'll give him a bond, and he's out of jail, and we're still just waiting to see what happens with his trial. Now, the point is, they make it no secret. They see us all as a threat. I don't care if you're 5 years old. I don't care if you're 95 years old. They see us as a threat. so that every time they commit an act of violence on you, it is somehow justified. And they feel comfortable terrorizing us, man, woman, and child, because they've been able to do so for hundreds of years and actually build much success doing it. They can feel comfortable doing this because they've been doing it for hundreds of years without consequence. And we argue about irrelevant stuff when I'm sure there are way more important things we can agree on, like our children not being shot. And we waste time arguing over stuff that was put in place for us to argue over and be divided over, instead of coming together agreeing on the important issues that we all agree on, like us not wanting our children to be shot in the street or harm coming to any of us without some kind of repercussion. Instead of turning our anger inward towards each other, we need to be using that energy to come together to protect ourselves, to use against the society that put us in this situation in the first place, and against anyone who wanted to keep things the same way that they are today, or people who want to go back to how they were a couple hundred years ago. We have to keep our eyes on the prize, and before we celebrate some moral victory, we have to make sure that we follow through. We have to make sure that we get the results first. There are no moral victories. There are victories and there are losses. And we are the only ones that will protect ourselves.
Hello and good evening. Yesterday we showed you leaked body cam video anonymously sent to Fox 4 News showing a Balch Springs police supervisor tasing a man in handcuffs.
We reported how it was other Balch Springs officers who brought the April 2016 incident to the attention of the police chief. Both his department and outside investigators reviewed the incident, and the chief punished the sergeant who used the taser. First on Fox 4 News 6, James Rose talked with the man who was tased. James.
Guys, Marco Stevenson acknowledges he has a reputation with law enforcement. He says when he found out about a report, he wanted to tell his side of the story, but he did not want to see the video.
He totally did me wrong, but I'm a Christian, so I'm not revengeful. I took it, and I just kept on going.
Marco Stevenson is the man in this Balch Springs police body cam video being tased while in handcuffs. In April of last year, Balch Springs officers responded to a 911 call about a man waving around a pistol in a neighborhood. As the officer with the body cam arrives, you can see Stevenson is on his knees with his hands on his head and appears to be complying. Officers approach with guns drawn. A gun is kicked away, later determined to be a BB gun.
Better watch it, Marco.
I spit a toothpick in the grass.
Moments later, after Stevenson was handcuffed, police say he spit toward one of the officers and was tased.
Don't pull away. You understand? You understand? Don't pull away. You understand? Don't pull away. Don't pull away. You get it? Do you get it?
Yes, sir. Spit a toothpick out over his shoulder. He's cocky and arrogant, and he had
you spit it over his shoulder?
Over his shoulder, yes, sir.
It was not on his face. We asked him why he's never viewed the police video, even after we showed it in our story Tuesday evening.
I've lived through it myself, so I didn't want to look at it because I don't want to traumatize myself and think about how the injustice in Balch Springs is going, so I told myself not to look at it.
Stevenson is well known to police, being booked into jail 36 times for charges ranging from criminal trespass to drug possession. He even pleaded guilty to aggravated assault on a Balch Springs officer. He never filed a complaint against the officer who tased him, despite other Balch Springs officers urging him to report it.
I had 2 officers come to me and say I need to report it, but I said it's like a hornet's nest. If I hit the hornet's nest, some gonna come after me, some gonna go the other way.
Balch Springs Police Chief Jonathan Haber says the sergeant's own officers ended up reporting the incident to him, and the video was reviewed by the Texas Rangers and the Dallas County DA's Public Integrity Unit. Neither agency found evidence of criminal wrongdoing, but the chief reprimanded his sergeant and put him on no contact with the public until he completed a series of training courses. Do you feel somewhat relieved knowing that other cops said this is not okay and they went to the chief?
Yes, sir, because that lets me know there are some cops that are righteous, that are doing the right thing.
Now, Stevenson says it was 2 white officers that urged him to report the incident, and it wasn't until we spoke this morning, he says, that he realized it was those Balch Springs officers who reported their own sergeant. He says he did not know the sergeant was punished, but now says he believes that punishment should have been more severe. We asked the police department for a response today, but we were told there would be no further comment.
How do you feel about what happened to you?
How do I feel about what happened? How would anybody feel getting shot?
Still visibly in pain and haunted by the night he was shot at 15 times by Escambia County Sheriff's deputies nearly a month ago. It all happened when a neighbor called 911 after spotting Roy Middleton rummaging through a car on his own driveway. He was mistaken for a car thief and unarmed when confronted by police.
They've said that you were reaching towards something and that you lunged at them. You made a lunging motion towards
Why
them.
would I lunge at someone who's halfway down my driveway? How I'm going to lunge at them with what? You know, I was getting ready to do what they asked me, raise my hands, and I got shot in doing that.
The Escambia County Sheriff has, all along, defended the actions of his officers, who remain on paid administrative leave.
The point to making the comment about the lunging was his herky-jerky movements that he was making, and again, a failure to follow the deputy's instructions.
Shot in his own driveway, outside his own car, while holding his car keys. He says his leg is now shattered, held together by metal rods. Middleton said the whole thing happened in about 30 seconds.
They should have asked me, did I live here, or ran my address and license plate or something. So, you know, before somebody's a suspect in your own yard, suspecting of what?
Police disagree.
Mr. Middleton was most assuredly a suspect for this scenario up until such time that he was identified. He was a suspect in an attempted car theft. I have an eyewitness that stated that called in to my folks, and that's what they responded to.
Middleton says he couldn't have done anything differently to change the outcome.
Were you sober that night?
Sure. I had a beer, a couple of beers earlier that day around 2 o'clock.
Adding insult to injury, he says he was handcuffed by deputies while he thought he was dying.
Do you ask yourself why? Why did this happen to me?
I ask myself why. Yeah, why they shot me first, and then why shoot so many times afterwards. Yeah, I ask why. That's all I can ask why.
Do you get any answers?
No, not yet.
So now the police finna pull up. You see, y'all call the police? He bagging up. He got his gun out. Oh shit. Oh shit. Oh shit. Oh shit. They got their guns out. Oh, they just killed this man. Damn. Oh my God. They just killed him. Oh, here we go again. They just killed this man. He's dead. Look how they flipping him over and that nigga already dead, man. That's fucked up, dog. Putting him in cuffs. He's dead. Oh my God. They just killed this man. He didn't have a gun on him. They cuffing him. Now they cuffing him. He already dead. He already dead. Y'all see this for yourselves. The man is already dead. They cuffing him. They cuffing him. I got everything on camera. From the time it started and everything. Oh my God. They just killed him, y'all. He dead. This is just like, I don't even know what to do. Oh my God, he's still holding his gun out. The man is dead.
Roll down that window, please. Can you roll down this window? Huh? Because you're... Give me your right name. You're giving me false info. Do you want to be charged on that? I'm trying to work with you guys. I'm letting your friend go on a warrant, and you're giving me somebody else's name that you're calling. Are you kidding me? Are you? Push your hands on your back. Push your hands around your back now. Kill me. You're giving me false info. Do you want to be charged on that? I'm trying to work with you guys. I'm letting your friend go on a warrant, and you're giving me somebody else's name that you're calling. Are you kidding me? Are you? Push your hands on your back.
All right, and we back on the forecast. So out in St. Louis, a couple years before the brother Anthony Smith was shot and killed by the police, the people were out protesting over the young brother Mansur Ball Bey getting shot in the back and killed by the police. So this Moorish American young brother is running away from the police, and they shoot him in the back, and it is justified.
The St. Louis Circuit Attorney says her office will not file charges against the officers involved in the shooting death of 18-year-old Mansur Ball Bey. Fox 2's Paul Shankman is live at the Cornahan Courthouse downtown, where Ball Bey's family was just informed of the decision. Paul?
Yeah, Shirley, the family's attorney says they are not surprised by the decision reached in this 43-page report issued by the circuit attorney today, but he says they are very disappointed. Ball Bey was killed last August by a single bullet that struck him in the back. It was fired by a St. Louis police officer after Ball Bey allegedly pointed a gun at another officer. It happened just after Ball Bey allegedly ran outside from the back of a two-family flat in the 1200 block of Walton. Police had been inside searching for guns and drugs. The circuit attorney's report outlines two versions of the story, one as told by the two officers, plus an ATF agent at the scene and an off-duty police officer who just happened to be in a nearby yard. The other version comes from the 14-year-old who was with Ball Bey at the time of the shooting. He claims Ball Bey did not even have a gun. However, the report says a palm print matching Ball Bey's was found on the ammunition clip of the gun he allegedly pointed toward one of the officers as he ran away. It also compares pictures of the gun found at the scene to pictures from Ball Bey's phone and on social media showing him holding what appears to be the same gun. Ball Bey's family insists the gun was planted by police at the scene and that the photos just show a kid doing something foolish.
One thing about this kid, he had good roots and he was really headed in the right direction. While he may have been associated with some people who were not so good and did not have a future, he did have a future. And we're going to maintain the fact that, hey, he did not have a gun that day.
Everything pointed in one direction. The only evidence there was to show that Mr. Ball Bey did not have a gun was his friend who was with him that day. His friend, however, told numerous versions of the events to the point where we found him to not be credible.
As had been reported early on, Ball Bey was killed by a single shot in his back. The circuit attorney's report explains the shot as having come from an officer behind Ball Bey who fired after allegedly seeing Ball Bey pointing his gun toward the officer in front of him. The circuit attorney's office concluded its investigation today and conducted it at the same time that the police department had done theirs through the Force Investigative Unit, although they released their results back in April and came to a similar conclusion. Chief Sam Dotson said in a statement today, quote, that he is confident the circuit attorney's conclusion is the result of a comprehensive review.
And their story was very similar to the Patrick Harmon situation where he was running away from the police and he kind of looked like he was looking back and was shot at the same time. Now the police are saying that he had a gun and his friend is saying that he did not have a gun. And then they'll show you all kind of pictures of this young brother with guns. God forbid he agrees with the Second Amendment in the Constitution, let alone follow the Second Amendment. But the police say they were executing a search warrant and he ran out, so they chased him and was left with no options but to shoot this young brother in the back.
Can you help me understand why the police chief might have said something like, just because he was shot in the back doesn't mean he was running away? Is there something else that could have happened here?
Well, the key is not just the entrance wound in the back on the right
upper side of the back, but the trajectory, because that will tell us something about the position that Mr. Ball Bey was in as he was fleeing. In other words, he wasn't shot squarely where the wound is clearly from back to front. It was actually at an angle, so he may have been turning. He may have been in the process of turning. Now, if he was in possession of a weapon, then the shooting could very well be justified, because if the police think there is an existential threat that that his life or his partner's life could be in jeopardy, then the shooting could very well be justified, even though the shot was to the back. And a lot depends upon whether Mr. Ball Bey had a gun at the time that that shot was fired.
Can this be conclusive, by the way? Can the forensics give the definitive answer to people who are understandably very, very upset? No one wants to hear that a teenager is shot in the back by the police.
I think that's true, but the trajectory is the trajectory. That's a fact. Now, what position he was in, where exactly was he when the shot was fired, what was going through the mind of the police officer, we don't know. I mean, these are things we can only speculate about, but it's crucial in deciding whether this was a case of too much force or it was justifiable.
So the police pushing the narrative of just because he was shot in the back does not mean he was running away. I'm surprised he didn't say just because I shot him and he stopped breathing doesn't mean that I killed him. Now, despite this young brother being a Moorish American and not black, and I'm guessing was raised by a Moorish American family, the St. Louis Circuit Attorney Jennifer Joyce can run with the story that just because he was shot in the back does not mean he was running away. They still could protect these police officers and not put their names out there until somebody finally leaked their names out.
You have to name the officers. They are not naming the officers. Mansur Ball Bey. No evidence, no forensic evidence has been released to say that this boy had a gun. He's shot in the back, spine severed. Medical examiner doesn't even disclose that. Goes back, gets the body, does a second autopsy after the police department contacts him and says, what you said at first is not jiving with what my officers are saying. That's the problem. It's at all levels. That's the problem. The bottom line is this. Oh, let me say one more thing about Mansur Ball Bey. Because we're still investigating that case, and we have to use our own confidential sources who've told us that Ronald Vaughan and Kyle Chandler killed him. And when you Google their names, you'll see that they're involved in another case of plain evidence. So you got all these officers working together. We have to have their names. Because if we have their names, then we can connect the dots, and we can see the pattern. And when you see that pattern of bad officers, then you can eliminate them. But without the names, we can't get to the source of the problem. The bottom line is that we need the names of those officers released. We need body cameras for accountability and reliability.
And come to find out, both of these officers, Officer Kyle Chandler and Ronald Vaughan, have a checkered past. Officer Ronald Vaughan was caught on camera planting evidence on a suspect. And that same circuit attorney, Jennifer Joyce, is the same office that dropped the charges on him then. The public defender then, Mary Fox, said a judge's recent decision to throw out evidence in a drug case provides landmark confirmation that St. Louis police sometimes plant evidence on suspects, something that we've been knowing for a long time now. And of course, they have always denied it. Now, my brothers and sisters, these two police officers did not care what he called himself. They didn't care what he identified as. They didn't care what he said his nationality was. This attorney in St. Louis, Jennifer Joyce, did not care what he called himself. Even though these officers were caught planting drugs on a suspect, they were still let off the hook. And this very same attorney in St. Louis, Jennifer Joyce, is the one who decided to let him go on both occasions. Now, if you want to practice certain beliefs, that's on you. What you do is your business. I don't care. And I don't believe anybody should be shoving ideas and pushing beliefs down other people's throats. But at some point, we are going to have to come together to build something to make sure this stuff stops happening regardless of what we call ourselves. Right now, we just have to leave our personal beliefs, our personal religions, all of that stuff at the door and come together for the things that we know we agree on and start actually doing things to build the nation that we're supposed to be building. And most importantly, protect that nation. We always get caught up in what's happening now, and it's easy to get caught up in the drama and the arguing and the debating and the fighting and the bickering. But we have to realize that throughout history, our people have always came together and built things that we need to build. Even our history here in America, we have a history of our ancestors building a solid economic base. The people that are in a dominant position, they don't want to give that up. Why would they want to give that to you? Why would they want things to be fair and equal? No, they want to stay in a dominant position. It is up to us to take back our position. It is us to make ourselves a voice in the world, to make ourselves a power in the world. And we can't do that by still being divided over the simplest of things. Divide and conquer is a very simple technique, but it is very effective. So shout out to the young brother, Mansur Ball. At some point, we gotta let all that protest and stuff be in the past. We can still commemorate it, still celebrate what our ancestors did, but we gotta let that be their legacy, and we gotta make our own. And we don't have time to waste.
Kyle Chandler and Ronald Vaughan are already, they're being sued for fabricating evidence in a previous case. Is that?
I'm aware of an allegation that was made against one of the officers.
There's a federal lawsuit. It's online.
I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
You know what? I just focus on what I'm doing, but we do. As part of our investigation, we look at the backgrounds of all the witnesses, including the officers. So we did check into those two officers, and we're aware that there was one instance where a judge in this circuit found one of the officers involved in this shooting to be not credible. So we were aware of that.
Yeah, they're both being sued by the defendant, by the person whose case was, the charges were dropped against. Jeremy Eden?
I'm not familiar with any federal lawsuit. We don't have anything to do with that here.
I would think that would weigh against their credibility.
Well, the fact that there was an allegation made would weigh against their credibility, but anybody can sue anybody for anything. So I don't put too much stock in it. I would look rather as to whether there was a
because it was on video.
Right, it was the case that we actually looked into. Remember that we charged,
right?
But we looked into it, and so did the U.S. Attorney's Office look into it, and we both drew the same conclusion, and we both found the officers to be credible.
Yeah.
But the charges were dropped because the judge didn't find them credible.
I understand that.
Right. Are you recording that?
Yeah. Wasn't there like a building inspector that worked with the police too?
Not in this case.
No, I thought there was. Maybe it's the off-duty officer that they thought was.
There was an off-duty officer.
Okay. One member of the ATO, was that Jason Flannery? Because I know he was there.
He wasn't in the back.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what his position was. I don't know that he was there or not, but I know he wasn't in the back.
Well, I know he wasn't one of the officers who fired. I know that, but he was on the scene.
I know he wasn't in the back.
Yeah.
That's your driver's license.
What crime have I been suspected of committing?
What's that?
What crime have I been suspected of committing?
You have no brake lights.
Is that a crime, officer?
It is. Give me your license.
According to People versus Battle, traffic infractions are not crimes.
Give me your license.
Unless there's been a crime committed, officer, I'm not showing my ID.
Has been committed, and I need to see your driver's
Where's
license.
the corpus delicti?
I need to see your driver's license.
Is there an injured party, sir?
I'm not asking you.
Is there an injured party?
I'm not asking you.
Is there an injured party, officer? According to Black's Law Dictionary, a crime is defined as there being an injured party.
Can't hear you.
According to Black's Law Dictionary, a crime is only defined as there being an injured victim or injured party. Is there an injured party?
Your brake lights don't work.
Okay, according to People versus Battle, traffic infractions are not crimes.
Okay.
If I've been suspected of a crime, then prove it.
You have committed a crime.
Okay, well, according to People versus Battle, officer, traffic infractions are not crimes. Please show me where the crime is.
Okay, ma'am, I'm not asking you. I'm telling you to give me your license.
According to People versus Battle, there is no crime.
I'm sorry?
Where's the corpus delicti? Okay, I'm surrounded. I'm surrounded with officers.
Alright. Ma'am, open the door.
I'm not. What crime have I been suspected of committing?
No brake lights. No brake light. We need your license.
According to People versus Battle, traffic infractions are not crimes.
You will please open your door, ma'am.
I'm not opening my door. Please do not attempt to touch me or my property if there's been no crime committed.
What'd you say?
Please do not attempt to touch me or my property unless there's been no crime committed, officer.
Alright, what we need to do is we need to find your license. We need your license, ma'am.
I'm not suspected of committing a crime.
Yes,
and unless there is no crime,
yes, ma'am.
I do not have to identify myself.
Ma'am, please please roll down your window and let us have your license.
I'm not.
Fine.
What crime am I being suspected of committing?
For a traffic violation of a break.
Traffic infractions are not crimes according to People versus Battle.
Ma'am, please open your window.
What crime am I being suspected of committing?
Ma'am, if you don't open your window, I'm gonna break your window.
What crime am I being suspected of committing? They're attempting to break my windows. They're attempting to break my windows, and there is no crime.
Give me your license.
There has been no crime committed. According to People versus Battle, traffic infractions are not crimes. Please do not attempt to assault me or my property.
Open the door so we don't have to break your
Officer,
window.
please do not touch my property or me if there's been no crime committed. They're about to bust the window. They're about to bust the window. They're about to bust the windows. They're about to bust the windows. There's been no crime committed here. Officer E. Parker, Officer C. Huffman, and Officer T. Webster. There has been no crime committed. There's been no crime committed. Please do not touch my property, ma'am, if there's been no crime committed. Please do not touch my property, ma'am. There's been no crime committed. They're damaging the property, and this isn't even my property. Please. Oh my God! Oh my God, I got glass in my eyes!
Brent Solomon got his hands on that video. He joins us now with the very latest. Brent?
We've decided to only share a portion of the video. Because we're talking about minors here, we're also blurring the faces of every child featured, as well as some of the graphic activity that was caught on camera.
What's up with you and the blacks?
The viral video starts with the question, ever wonder what happens in the football locker room? It showcases football players from Short Pump Middle School simulating sex acts. Black players on the ground, other students on top.
What's going on?
A student types, quote, "We gonna blank the black out of these African American children from Uganda."
I felt sad for my child that he had to experience this.
This parent doesn't want to be identified to protect her son.
You see kids in the locker room forcing kids over the bench. You see kids on the ground thrusting on other kids, making racial slurs as they're thrusting. You see the kids asking to get up and to stop and screaming.
That parent telling 12 what's also alarming, the behavior was allowed to go on as long as it did. I reached out to Henrico Schools, a spokesman saying the district is aware of the video, which is offensive and wrong. The district says it will take appropriate action.
If I was one of those parents and my kid was on the bottom of that pile, I'd be angry.
I took the video to Henrico supervisor Tyrone Nelson, who believes the school system should take action.
Are these kids playing around or was this some type of racial situation? If it is young kids being held against their will and being sexually manipulated, then that's one thing.
Was it something that not everybody was okay with?
No, they were not okay with it.
Was he in a position to even really defend himself?
No. He had people that were straddling over top of him. Racism should not be tolerated. You should be able to send your kids to school and feel as though they are being protected and safe.
All right, while you heard the response from the district office, I took things a step farther, reaching out to both the school board chair and the board member who represents Short Pump. Since you elected them, we figured you deserve to hear their thoughts. Neither returned my messages.
This next story is so unbelievable, we didn't think it could possibly be true. But after receiving thousands of records and declassified reports from the Army, it's confirmed that during the Cold War, the United States military conducted secret tests on unsuspecting people in the city of St. Louis. A local sociologist will make her findings public tomorrow, but she spoke first to the I-Team's Lisa Zigman.
Lisa Martino-Taylor's life work has been to uncover details of the Army's ultra-secret military experiments carried out in St. Louis and other cities during the 1950s and 60s.
This study was secretive for a reason. They didn't have volunteers stepping up and saying, yeah, I'll breathe zinc cadmium sulfide with radioactive particles.
These Army archive pictures show how the tests were done in Corpus Christi, Texas in the 1960s. In Texas, planes were used to drop the chemical, but in St. Louis, the Army placed chemical sprayers on buildings and station wagons. City officials were kept in the dark about the tests. The Cold War cover story was that the Army was testing smoke screens to protect cities from a Russian attack. The truth, according to Martino-Taylor, was much more sinister.
It's pretty shocking. The level of duplicity and secrecy, clearly they went to great lengths to deceive people.
By making hundreds of Freedom of Information Act requests, she uncovered once classified documents that confirmed the spraying of zinc cadmium sulfide.
The greatest concentration of this compound was sprayed near the Pruitt-Igoe housing complex just south of downtown St. Louis. It was home to 10,000 low-income people, and an estimated 70% were under the age of 12.
Martino-Taylor claims they all unknowingly inhaled this compound morning, noon, and night, so the government could measure its effects on their lungs.
So this was in violation of all medical ethics, all international codes, and the military's own policy at that time.
In 1994, then Congressman Richard Gephardt asked the Army to open its records and explain the St. Louis testing.
We want to make very sure that nothing went on that would harm anyone and that all the facts are out on the table.
Documents released in the 90s show the Army placed sprayers on this former Knights of Columbus building on Lindell and in Forest Park. The Army always insisted the chemical compound was safe. Martino-Taylor believes documents prove otherwise.
There's a lot of evidence that indicates that people in St. Louis, in the city, particularly in minority communities, were subjected to military tests that was connected to a larger radiological weapons development and testing project.
For the first time, she links the St. Louis testing to a company called U.S. Radium, a company notorious for lawsuits involving radioactive contamination of its workers.
United States Radium had this reputation where they had been found legally liable decades prior for producing a radioactive powdered paint that killed many young women who painted fluorescent watch dials.
While the Army admits it added a fluorescent substance to the zinc-cadmium compound, details of whether it was radioactive remain secret. Documents uncovered to date indicate the Army never conducted follow-up studies to see whether the compound caused long-term health issues. In 1972, after years of crime, poverty, and decline, the government destroyed the Pruitt-Igoe housing complex. Lisa Zigman, News Channel 5, I-Team.
Now, the company U.S. Radium no longer exists. Martino Taylor has placed all of her research, including the declassified documents, online, and will link you to that data at ksdk.com. Now, she will make all of her findings public tomorrow at St. Louis Community College Merrimack campus. In the meantime, if you remember the spraying, the I-Team's Lisa Zigman would like to hear from you.
All right, and we back on the forecast, and I want to say RP to the young brothers, Jordan Edwards and Mansur Ball Bey, who was shot and killed by the police, and the young Moorish American brother was shot in the back, and we see the police was justified in doing so. So before we go celebrating Officer Roy Oliver being charged, let's wait to see what happens first. Because I hate to see more disappointed faces when what statistically usually always happens does happen. And our children's future, and our children's safety, their ability to have success in the future, that all depends on if we are able to come together today and work things out today and put aside petty differences, leave our beliefs at the door, and work on the things that we agree on and build the things that we know we need to build like we did before. But this time, protect it and protect ourselves, protect our children, protect our families, protect our culture and protect our heritage. At the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. So, as always, man, we have got to start standing for something, or we're going to keep falling for anything.